what is it you would tell a aspiring to be a frontier company not to do? If you really want to embrace AI, don't go there.
I definitely wouldn't go and lead with AI. I would lead with...
Hey everyone, welcome back to a new episode of the Zeroed In podcast. Today, we'll be talking about a problem that lots of manufacturers feel right now, very hardly, I would say. Everyone wants AI, then we'll talk about that. Not everyone really understands why they want AI, but most companies are actually facing one big problem they were facing in the past already, the need to correlate, merge, integrate IT and OT worlds and data, right? And that's a problem that we're seeing again and again. We'll discuss at length about this topic today. I'm Olivier, your host, and joining me, there is Adam from Microsoft, who spends his time with customers and partners looking at the big industry shifts and what it means to become a frontier company. So you'll tell us a bit about this concept of frontier company, Adam. And Marvin, who lives in the world of implementation. Running Thing Zero, we are engaging with customers on a daily basis who are trying to implement AI to make the most out of the IT and OT data. One point we'll bring up, I'm sure, is how much IT can bring to the OT world. We talked on the Zeroed In podcast in the past about this clash of the OT and IT world. Today, we want to reconcile these two worlds in many ways. Let's get started with a little, sentence from each other. First, introducing yourself, and then telling us what you think we're trying to do in terms of helping manufacturers today. So let's start with you, Adam.
Thank you, Olivier. I'm Adam Bogobowicz, and I live in this world of abstraction. So it's going to be really interesting for us to talk to Marvin, because we're going to represent two different ways of looking at the world. So, you don't have to be able to read all the numbers on my t-shirts and add them up or multiply them, but you can still figure out that I'm from Microsoft. Like that's how I want to lift this conversation too.
Hi, Marvin Tansley, CEO of Thing Zero. And, I guess when we talk about how we're trying to help manufacturers today, we're having been in manufacturing and in product development my whole career. You arrive in this space where you're saying, look, there's this absolutely monumental thing that's about to happen, and everybody sees it and we're involved in it. Now the question is how do we take what we've taken from the IT world and in scale and cloud and bring that to manufacturing and marry the two and really give a project that lands and really makes a difference to these frontier companies, and that with it, they end up riding the next wave rather than being embattled in not making the right decision or the right implementation to successfully move into this.
That's interesting. I'm actually going to be more precise than this, because I'm going to say it's all about data. Like when I talk to customers, what I really want them to do is take the information they already have on the factory floor with their machines, with their systems. I just want to help them make better decisions with that data. And that's where the conversation about AI is going to come in and how it all comes together. But it really is about that bit of making sure that decisions are being possible, especially when we live in this world of changing an incredible level of change that people have to deal with.
And Adam, that actually gave me a good segue for my first question to you. When you're engaging with these customers, when you're telling, look at your data, that's where the core of the solution is. What are they trying to achieve? What are they looking for? What is the goal that they are, going towards?
The goal is still the same. Like when you engage with customers who actually run production, they want safer environment. They want better throughput. They don't want, waste on the production line. They want to be able to connect to their customers. They want to make better decisions to run their operations in a better way. So that is still the same. I think what's changing and what's becoming possible is now they want to make those decisions and optimize their systems in a new way. Because they see that the new way is possible, because there's a new way of bringing intelligence into their operations is become possible.
And so, Marvin, on your side, when you engage with companies, big manufacturers, what do you see being the first thing that slows them down? Like, what is the big thing, in achieving the goals that Adam just described? Is it data access? Is it security concerns, whatnot? Is it management changes? What is it that you think is the big blocker here?
I think it's the very last thing you brought up, which is, and it ties to what Adam said, which is, hey, we're just trying to make things faster and cheaper and have less defects. And, we have the data that we have and we've built some dashboards, or maybe, there's a data historian at the machine that the operator looks at or something like that. And so the as always in these monumental shifts, it's like, what does it take for you to understand the magnitude of it and how it can help, right? So when you start saying, one operator can look at many gauges on a single machine and make good decisions, and that can be an excellent top operator that achieves a high efficiency rate. But can you do that across 7,000 machines on 3 shifts, right? So this is where you talk about scale, where what Adam's talking about, where you're collecting data. So starting with the idea of what is the problem? What is your gain? Why should you go through this journey? And what does it mean to you, right? So that's really sort of, I think IBM talked about it a long time ago, which is this idea of disturbing and understanding there's a problem so that you can move towards a change.
Okay. And so in this clash of cultures that you're observing, because you're not saying that, but, that's what's behind very often this OT and IT world that I wouldn't say grew apart, but have been living in silos for good reason, like security, safety, whatnot. They didn't really need to get together that much, or it was a good way of working, each on their side. What's your take on that? Why has it been that way for so long? And why is it so hard these days to reconcile these two different worlds?
Yeah, I think that, OT, when I started way back when, was, doing industrial instrumentation out in the field, and your measurement devices using fancy Coriolis stuff, and the data would come off there. And ultimately the only thing you needed was how much X fluid has gone through, or how many spins has an electric meter made, and what's the bill, right? So it was only to achieve sort of the same concept of a cash register at a grocery store. Now, when we look at it and we go to it and we say, look, what I need to know is exactly what's my inventory on the shelf at this moment, and what should I be ordering? And that fits into just-in-time supply chains. And it goes into deciding when should the truck come and show up. But if that's disconnected and I'm only getting data 7 days after the process is finished, the order is done, the latency is so high that it affects the efficiency of my operation. So again, it goes back to shifting to say, what if I could have dynamic OT data? What would it mean in my ability to better operate my facilities?
So is it fair to say, Adam, in reaction to what Marvin just said, that, IT has some interesting things to bring to the table to help OT, but OT, as Marvin just described, is already doing things a certain way that has lots of benefits and for good reason. So can you help us understand what is it that both teams are doing well and should be doing more together in moving forward?
So it's interesting because I come to it from a perspective of IT. That's how I started my career 30 years ago. And I can definitely see this interesting tension in the space that's what's building up here. And I want to say that, the OT has done an amazing job in how we run factories and plants today. It's pretty much an automated in many ways, autonomous ways of running things in a factory. People are still there, but they are not doing the task. Most of the tasks are done by the machines, overseen by people. And you have to be safe, you have to be efficient, and you have to do everything on time for those operations to run in an incredibly efficient way. problem with that is that to do this, you have to solve it by every machine, by every plant, in every process separately. So OT is doing this incredibly heavy lift of solving those problems over and over again. So when I look at it from an IT perspective, IT never behaved this way. Different set of problems and a different set of incentives, but IT was always about the scale. How do you govern and secure everything at scale? How do you make sure they have procedures and structures in place to do all of those things at scale? So those two worlds are so different, but if we can bring them closer together, if we can use the scale and governance of the IT and apply this onto the OT world, which now for the first time technology allows us to do, we can make an amazing difference in how we operate and how we behave.
I've been in as you said, in the IT business for a long time as well, but also I'm a bit of a fanboy for Microsoft. So I remember, when Patch Tuesday used to happen, was like this major event, right? And then, what was the difference between this device and that device and this mobile phone and that mobile phone? And so if you look at the problems that were solved as far as scale and reliability and like how many devices is Microsoft managing in the patch today? Billions, right? So and they're all different and they all have legacy and they all have different pieces around them. And then you're flowing all that data up and putting security protection around them in managing and thwarting, attack surfaces. So this is, rather than this, like there's scale that's been built there that's just mind boggling. And not sure that, unless you've lived in that sort of world, you understand what the scale looks like.
And the cloud lifted it one more time because IT has been working with these set of parameters for years. And some of those patch moments were painful, especially in early days. But we don't talk about it anymore. We solved it. And cloud was one of those waves of change that really made a difference here in terms of how efficiently you can manage things that are very different scale.
Yeah. So on paper, all of that looks really good, right? We have this promise of IT with the scale and the tooling capabilities, OT with the efficiency, the precision, the knowledge for the domain they are into. Look, the question I have is why is it going wrong most of the time? Marvin, maybe from your experience, why when we start talking about mostly around AI implementation for OT optimization and processes, performance, efficiency, and whatnot, what goes wrong? Why are these two stories not really working well together day one?
Well, I think, I think from your podcast, Olivier, and same with you, Adam, you can speak to the fact of what is this POC or pilot purgatory that people end up in, right? And I remember working in the field of cybersecurity, walking into a very, very large mobile carrier and them saying, we've tried to do identity access management 3 times. A large financial firm. We tried to do data security and data loss prevention 3 times. All of them fail. Why is this going to be different? And it's like, start with the end in mind. Get all the key stakeholders on. Understand what you're going to need for scale. When you buy a company, a large aircraft manufacturer we worked with, they bought a bunch of companies, and all of a sudden the CISO is like, you can't take that. You don't have even a view of security associated with this, right? So you got to wrap all this AI. If that data is doesn't have great, like from the beginning to the end, understanding that it's undisturbed, that it's in a place, that it's bad enough that that you manage, your LLMs and they hallucinate, and how do you ground your data to prevent that? Now imagine you've got holes where your data can be attacked and injected, right? So now what you need is a plan that talks about what the end state is. You don't say, hey, I'm going to connect to the factory and create dashboards. Anybody can do that. How do you connect 700 factories with 7,000 machines and get a view on it where you know that this machine is running in 20 different factories, and I'm going to be able to predict when it's failing based on what I'm seeing from frequency, vibration, whatever, and correlate that. That's where the power of this comes, right?
Yeah. Adam, what do you say customers to quote unquote reassure them? Because when you're seeing, all the, and we'll talk about complexity of AI and so on, but when they're seeing all that, they kind of have an idea, okay, I have these two data silos, I have ideas and what I want to achieve in terms of, efficiency, enhancements or whatnot. What do you tell them to make them feel comfortable in pursuing that idea of using AI in their context?
It's a new way of thinking that really we need to develop to be able to answer this question. And I think about AI in the following way. And by the way, when I think of AI, I don't think LLMs. I think in the broader context of what AI really means in context of manufacturing. And the key idea here is context. So for the AI to be useful when you engage with it, in this complex environment that we operate in, when we make things, the AI has to be aware of what people do, what decisions they make, who they interact with, how do they interact with them, what was the last time they talked to somebody, what was the context in the conversation they had with other people. Because all that interactions is necessary for the AI to be able to understand what answer is relevant at that moment in the situation that people are experiencing, the connections that we have as human beings in the enterprise. But even that is not enough. You may have this context of people. For AI to be effective, AI also has to have a context of the rules of the business. So, what are the procedures that you have to follow? How do you follow them? Do you follow them differently in one country than you follow them in the other? Again, without this context, just an LLM, you cannot make any interesting and intelligent decisions. And it's still not enough, because once you understand what people do and their IQ, their context, and what the rules are, you still have to understand the business rules of the business itself. What are all the systems of records doing today? What that information about systems of records, how it's impacting what it is they need to do today? Can you pause on your production line to fix a problem, or you shouldn't because there's an order coming that you have to relate to? So for AI to be effective and to even have an interesting conversation about AI in the enterprise, you have to ground it in all this context, the people context, the business context, and the set of rule context. Only then you can really answer this question.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love having both of you, because these perspectives are different, but definitely complement each other. Because my next question for you, Marvin, is this nice picture that we're getting from Adam that, once again, it's like, it looks great. It looks good. Our customers, they go to proof of concept, sometimes on their own. They test things out because, there are tools out there, services that makes it not so hard. But, they very often just get stuck, as you were mentioning, in that proof of concept, stage. And there's a bunch of projects that never go anywhere because they were missing ingredients, because they were not going the right direction. What is it that, Marvin, you would recommend a customer today when they have this great idea of leveraging AI, merging data, and making the most out of all of that, to not end up in that graveyard of proof of concept projects? What is your secret set of ingredients that they need to put in that kitchen day one, even if they don't really think they need it?
Yes. No, look, to say what I said before, but and then add some to it is, what is your ROI? What is the aha of this, right? When we were in the year 2000, they said, oh, everything has to have an ROI of 3 months, right? But that was hallucinations. And the truth was that a lot of this technology took a long time to move. So when you're maturing, I was working in a factory and we went from linear production to cellular manufacturing, right? And moved to Kanban. So what this means is we went from somebody at the beginning of the line putting a bad part in something that got all the way to the end of the line, and then somebody discovered the whole thing was bad, and they'd already spent money on everything making it bad. And whereas each cell is saying, oh, this is a problem, I'm going to stop the line now and I'm going to fix this so that I don't end up producing more bad all the way down with more money involved in that bad, right? So when I say what what is it that you want to achieve? So if you think about, and I saw this in the cybersecurity space, was people would go to the name your big show, cybersecurity, come back with a shiny object, half implement that. And companies ended up being system integrators, not cybersecurity operators. They had 40 different products that are all shifting at different times with different purchasing. And so why wouldn't you just buy a car because you want a fleet of cars for taxis, right? Figure out what works about that car and then decide how you're going to modify it after. Why do you want to start as a system integrator? If you've got security built into a platform, you've got a company. I saw an article this morning from somebody that was talking about, agentic AI is going to need security for policy management. This is already done. This is done in Entra. This is set, it's on. It's clear that there's going to be more agents that are on people, and how do we manage them? How do we make sure that context, how we know their behavior is acting the right way? So what I'm saying is, and this was at an MIT product development course that I went to, and then you start going through the spiral, figure out what you need next, do the next spiral, and prove as you go through that you have and can achieve your ROI. And then say, now what do we need to do? Don't go buy like 40 products and say, hey, let's put them all together and see if we can solve a complex problem of integrating everything to solve the problem, which is, how do I apply agents to be able to monitor a line to understand whether their line's operating properly?
Just want to sum that up. Marvin, if I understand correctly, we are talking about keep an eye on the ROI, what you're really trying to achieve. Start small, iterate, and never leave security for later. It has to be in there, right? It's one of the ingredients. So yeah, Adam, what's your take, especially with your IT ad here?
So what I've heard is don't reinvent the wheel, which is, I agree. Like, definitely, given the conversation about IT/OT we just had, is like, let's not solve it 100 times over. So the bit that I want to add here too is, when you are looking for a project with a new set of technology that you haven't yet touched, AI is new to most of us. Look for projects that are simple with a very clear value that you can attach to them. But there is a twist that I want to put at the end of the statement. Look for projects that when you implement, you can replicate into 100 other places. So even if you're the most brilliant and solve the best, most complex problem in your factory, this is one place you solved it for. Not only you're probably not going to be successful with it because it's difficult to take the learnings forward, but you're not going to teach others of how to do it. So find problems that you can replicate, the same issue, this hopefully simpler issue that you can solve many times over and help others. That's what's going to give you scale.
Yeah, I like that. So I want to switch a little bit here. We've not talked technology that much on purpose, but still, people are inundated with vocabulary around AI. There's different types of AI, generative AI, and we talk about agentic AI, and there's going to be physical AI. I would like for you, Adam, first, to kind of like, once again, put your IT guy hat on and educate people on what is it they should expect from that new wave of agentic AI that everyone is talking about, that everyone is telling our customers, our joint customers, you should use agentic AIs. And what does that mean to them? What really can that achieve to them and for them?
It sounds mysterious. I know that we build this new language that we don't really explain and are clear about. But agentic AI is actually quite simple. It's actually the meaning is in the word itself. We are giving LLMs some agency. When we go and query, ask a question of an LLM, that's a level of agency. We ask a question, we get an answer. And those answers are getting really good. We can ask very precise questions about documents that we need for maintenance or, whatever the question would be. When we talk about agents now, agentic AI, we basically extend the level of agency beyond question and answer level. Like the simplest way of extending is by saying, okay, I'm not going to ask this question every morning. I want this question to be answered for me at the beginning of my shift. I want to know what happened on the previous shift. I want to know if there were any issues. I would like the AI to give me a plan of how do I need to handle those changes that happened and impacting my shift as the new supervisor. So that's the more agency towards the AI. act on my behalf in a very prescribed way. But this thing can go forward. Like, okay, don't just give it to me in the beginning of the day. Tell me every time there is an issue. That's more agency. That now AI has the right to interrupt my day and tell me that there's maybe there's a missing part in the warehouse, or the truck didn't arrive, and maybe then suggest what it is that I should do about it. And then when you really think about the agentic concept, people think about autonomy, like the AI not simply giving suggestions, but making decisions on my behalf, being able to connect to systems of records, to make changes to them, to actuators, to actually change things in real time. Autonomous driving is as much autonomy as I've seen. There's somebody making decisions of how to move that vehicle on a road on behalf of the passenger.
Yep.
And that opens up another category of conversation of how much of the agency do we want to give to AI. So, but let me pause here.
Yeah. And I will switch to you, Marvin, for some concrete answers on how to make all of that safe and secure. Because what you just described, full self-driving, Adam, on your side, is interesting in the fact that automation is not new. Like, we've been automating factory floors for a long time in a very very concrete, predictive, and known context. What's new and different is the ability for AI agents to evolve in new environment with new conditions, and to do more things. But that triggers that reaction and question that, Marvin, I'd like for you to help us understand is, now we give agency to some software, some artificial intelligence for acting or reacting in new unknown contexts. How safe is that? How secure can it be? What are the guardrails that can be put in place to make sure that we are not making things less safe, more dangerous, more risky than they were previously?
Yeah, that is, I'm going to break that down in a couple different buckets, but I'm going to start with the first one, which is basically, this problem's already been solved. It's called efficacy. Will a drug kill you, or will it make you better? How do you test that? The higher the risk is associated with how that drug is used and what it does, the more you have to test in order to build the trust that's associated with risk. And risk is just a curve that you look at, that you say, is it worthwhile it taking a decision for me? Because it will, so it would start with, you have a camera, you've got a defective part, you will notify the operator, you have a defective part, the operator doesn't respond. Now you start going through a policy ladder of cascading, notify up, and then you eventually say, okay, well, I need somebody to allow me to shut this machine down. So this is like where you put a human in the loop to make decisions, right? And then, as you talked about, Olivier, the human on the loop. So we talk about that this AI isn't, and agents aren't meant to replace people. And we go back to what I talked about the meeting. Any expert operator who's been competent and capable can read multiple cages on a single machine, but you can't read it on 200 machines. So if the agent is monitoring those 200 machines, and as Adam says, you come off and the next operator comes in on the next shift and says, by the way, you've got a weird frequency vibration coming off the bearing unit on this thing, then you know that you thinking that knowledge has been passed on. It hasn't been forgotten. And so when the agent is dedicated to the task, it has memory, it has context, and it has specialization, so that it's not trying to solve all the problems. All it's doing is, call it a machine health agent. And it's looking at 200 machines. And all it's doing, now you have specialized agents with specialized tasks. And then from there, to keep it safe, is the risk associated with autonomy, where it's going to make a decision, has to be proportionate to, will it cause, human life? Will it cause loss of revenue? So you walk down the risk of a 5x5 impact, which basically says what's the impact and what's the risk, the likelihood of it, right? So on the one side, so you decide what the autonomy is going to be based on this circumstance. Next, then you go down and you say, well, there's this thing called CIP, critical infrastructure protection. We know, especially in these times where we're at war, where people want to secure infrastructure, where other nation states want to do this, where people want to steal your IP for competitive purposes for their nation state. There's many things in here. So an agent, as I go back to the data, you have to know that it's real and that it hasn't been tampered with and that it's coming in and that the system itself, what are the attack vectors and do I have that properly covered? Again, commiserate with risk, right? Am I going to blow up a refinery or am I going to ransomware a factory and shut down the ability for me to ship any of my goods out because my distribution center's been shut down, right? So this is where you have to do a risk assessment. This is something we do for clients all the time. Walk in, do an OT risk assessment. The cybersecurity insurance companies are requiring people to do this now. And so you understand your risk portfolio, you look at where your holes are and you do that. So to me, it's like, you do this, but you do it right. And then we go back to the, autonomous car story. They're not allowed on highways. They're only allowed on urban streets. Why? Because if they make a mistake, the risk is lower because the speed is lower. And the chance of the occupant having a life-threatening thing, eventually it'll get to road and trucks will be moving, but trucks aren't going to be driving autonomously through cities. There's just like too much chaos. Eventually it'll get there, but it has to refine itself and prove that.
I think it goes back to trust. Trust is earned. So the AI and the agents, they have to earn the trust for us to let them do things that, that we would want them to do. And we know how to do this. We do this at work all the time. We have a new colleague join the team. We don't let them, choose the next production run. Like that's not what we do. When we have kids, we oversee. There is always a grown-up in the loop. So in the AI world, you need the human in the loop as the AI and the system are building trust that we can then use to make those decisions in all the appropriate way.
Yeah. And for the developers in the room, there's one dimension which I think is super important to remind people is that we're not switching everything to a statistical model. We will still have deterministic code that is executing commands that eventually an agent is asking. Like typically we have guardrails that will prevent a random agent to say, stop this machine. If there are deterministic factors that we know will be problematic, that command will be ignored by the system, right? And to your point about trust, the same way a truck driver needs to have a license, needs to do drug and alcohol tests regularly, and needs to take slips and whatever, because human can make errors as well. We'll have this kind of guardrails for agents as well. It's not going to be, everything statistical, everything, amount of risk, then let's do it. We'll definitely want to have these guardrail in place. So I think that's a super important part to not ignore, which is deterministic code that we've been developing for automation in Industry 3.0 are there, and they're there to stay. And actually, agentic AI will help enhance them even more.
Human in the loop, people on the factory floor, people making decisions is not going away. Like we are needed. Yeah. That is IT code.
Yeah. And it's going to be augmented people because they'll have more information, accurate information that will help them making even better decisions, right?
Yeah. I want to jump in here just for 1 minute because this is exactly, the adage about the last mile is the most expensive part. Like when you're connecting, Wi-Fi systems or people to their, you can put a big highway, but then you have to create all these small roads for people to get to the big highway, right? And that part's the expensive part. So human in the loop for me is if we go back to sort of Six Sigma, how do I solve problems? Where do I focus my resources in my factory of improving or in my company of improving things in order to get to a higher efficiency rate? I'm not going to go into a factory and put 100,000 sensors in there and start looking at all the data, right? I'm going to put maybe an observational sensor and something else. And then when something is going wrong and the line stops, the operator is going to tell the agent where they think the problem is. And now you're going to start deciding, where am I going to invest to put sensors in place so that I get the right data so that I can improve by X percentage of my productivity. You can't just go connect all that stuff. That's my point. And so the human, this goes to, and I saw a great article, it's the known is not helpful, right? I know that if this light comes on, that it means this is a problem. That's the known. What matters is the expertise of the unknown, that you're going to then educate the agent on what's the unknown, that's going to make it more effective, and it's going to develop memory, and then it's going to start correlating with its LLM to be able to predict what's going to happen next. And then you start deciding what your investment programs look like for your Six Sigma. Where can I get the best productivity out of it?
Fascinating. So we can be at that for hours. So let's wrap it up. And for that, I want to do it backwards. Usually we end up saying, hey, what should people do and go do, if they want to get started with AI in the next 30 days? I want to ask you the question differently. Adam, you first. What is it you would tell a aspiring to be a frontier company not to do? Like, don't start this, don't do that. If you really want to embrace AI, what are the things you would say? Don't go there.
Oh, you're throwing me a curveball here. I definitely wouldn't go and lead with AI. I would lead with a problem. I would lead with what it is that you are after. So don't think that the AI is the panacea to your whatever problem it is. It's a solution to it. It's an incredible tool. But that's what it is. It's a tool.
Okay. What about you, Marvin?
Yeah, we're 100% aligned, which is, again, going back to my experience, whether it was, building natural gas meters and control valves, or whether it was silicon wafers and SIM cards for cryptographic purposes, it really came down to what is the problem? How every time, I talked about, we went from linear to cellular manufacturing. That brought our costs down by dimes and allowed us to increase our market share by percentage points because we could be more competitive, right? So what is not just the manufacturing problem, what's the business problem, and how's the front office and the back office connect? My trucks are leaving half empty. Why? Because you don't know whether the order is done or not. And if you take that OT data to tell you when the order is done, then your ERP can make a decision to schedule trucks better, right? So creating dynamic OT data and bringing that to the front office to be able to make decisions is the equivalent of, favorite story, of shutting down your grocery store at the end of the month or week, and doing inventory, or the end of the day, and now saying, I need to order so many cans of this and that, versus every time it goes by the cash register, when you're about to order something. So that dynamic data is be critical to manufacturers being more competitive.
When you are thinking about bringing AI into your environments, think about the people context, the processes context, the set of rules that you have context, and the context of the broader enterprise, the system of records. Don't let AI be this island of no understanding. Make sure that the AI that you deploy has the full context to be able to be effective. That's how you're going to multiply and take them. That's how you're going to be the frontier with AI. That's probably my statement here.
Yeah.
Nice.
And my point to that is, make sure you architect it. Don't create a specialized SaaS app that's looking at one component, because you're going to end up with an island. That's, what I think I heard you say, Adam. And make sure that data can all commingle so that you can really start saying, hey, what does raw product A do better than raw product B? And how does that, so you can start really asking big questions about your whole organization.
Yep. And AI is one of the many tools that will help you solve your problems, achieve your ROI, and so on. It's not an end goal. It's a means to an end. And well, that's our show for today. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. Adam, Marvin, thanks for your time. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and to give us a like or leave a comment as well for Adam, for Marvin, for myself. We appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.